If you were an insightful buyer looking to purchase a mid-engine sports car for yourself in the late 1960s and early 70s, you were left with few choices. You got the Lotus Europa for the more budget-friendly sports car. And then, climbing in price, you got the Ferrari 246 Dyno and even the Lamborghini Miura at the top of that list. Now, these were all great cars in their own right, but there was just one problem, especially for potential buyers stateside: the availability of parts and qualified technicians to work on these cars. Should anything break, you would face a lot of downtime waiting for parts to be imported from Britain or even Italy. But one car aimed to change all of that and open up the mid-engine sports car market wide. It was a car that was relatively affordable for what it offered and one that packed an unbeatable American drivetrain capable of generating immense power with a variety of off-the-shelf parts. This car was to be America's new supercar, and this is the story of the legendary De Tomaso Pantera. The name Pantera is Italian for the word panther, which was a fitting name for a car that was as low-slung and aggressive as the Pantera would become. The man behind the frenzy of the Pantera was Alejandro De Tomaso, an ex-Formula One racer turned automaker. Alejandro began his Formula One career in 1957 for a privateer team based out of Italy. Throughout that season, he proved to be a highly respectable driver, though not a championship-winning type. By the mid-1960s, De Tomaso had shifted his focus to his new car company, De Tomaso, which would serve as his outlet to build prototype race cars and eventually street cars. In the early days of these road-going vehicles, there were the stylish and nimble Vallelunga and the Mangusta, of which only 59 were made initially. The Mangusta was De Tomaso's second road-going car, following the Vallelunga. It was a mid-engine sports car powered by a small-block Ford V8, ironically sourced from a deal that fell through with Carroll Shelby. The Mangusta, while a step up from the Vallelunga, wasn't exactly groundbreaking. However, it served as proof that De Tomaso could design and produce sports cars beyond limited production runs. With the Mangusta paving the way, De Tomaso's next car to play was the Pantera. In the United States, they would be distributed through Lincoln and Mercury dealerships. The Pantera's body was designed by Tom Ciarda at Gia, and from the initial sketches, they knew they had something special. The Pantera was a perfect blend of an aggressive wedge shape with finely proportioned and sculpted Italian design elements that contributed to its striking presence. At the front, it even repurposed Alfa Romeo Berlinetta headlights and featured distinctive taillights. Underneath its beautiful body was a new Aerosteel monocoque chassis, supported by a four-wheel independent suspension with equal-length 8 arms and coilover shocks. True to De Tomaso's racing spirit, the Pantera's suspension was tuned for performance, complemented by factory disc brakes at all 4 corners and a lively manual rack and pinion steering setup. Continuing their partnership with Ford as they had with the Mangusta, the Pantera also utilized a mid-mounted 4V engine. This setup promised to deliver exceptional performance and handling characteristics, making the Pantera a formidable contender in the mid-engine sports car market of its time. However, this time around, it was not the 302 Windsor engine. This time, it was a 351 cubic inch Cleveland 4V8, which was a truly noticeable improvement at around 330 horsepower in stock trim, giving the Panta impressive low-end torque compared to the 302 or even the earlier Mangusta's 289. This performance came from a vehicle that made an appearance at just around 3150 Ls. Dry, meaning the Panta was a serious contender almost anywhere in the world. 0 to 60 occurred in 5.5 seconds. Additionally, the Panta had a 5-speed transaxle, which allowed it to reach a stock top speed of around 160 miles per hour and cover the quarter mile in the high 13s to low 14-second range. By 1970, the world had its most memorable look at the Panta at the New York Car Expo, where it was a raving success with an MSRP just shy of $10,000. This made the Panta literally half the cost of the equivalent Lamborghini Miura, which, interestingly enough, both shared the same wheelbase. The Panta was a very appealing proposition both visually and economically. By 1971, the first Pantas had already made their journey across the sea and arrived in Lincoln and Mercury showrooms in America, selling quite well, with 1,000 vehicles sold within the first year, plus an additional 300 sales abroad. However, not everything was perfect. In true Italian automaker style at the time, the build quality on some of these Pantas was 95% of the way there for the early vehicles. These hand-built cars weren't all perfect, and for $10,000, customers would expect them to be. Ford had zero desire to sell something through their showroom network that they couldn't guarantee the quality of, as they would be somewhat on the hook. Therefore, Ford acquired an 84% controlling stake in the company that year and helped improve production to bring the vehicles more in line with things like panel gaps and overall precision. This kicked off the 20-plus year production run of the Panta, which would spawn countless variations of the iconic car and numerous mid-year refreshes aimed at keeping the platform alive. So buckle your lap belts, as there's a lot to cover here. For 1972, the De Tomaso Panda received slight alterations from the 1971 debut version, which included the introduction of a new, larger camshaft. In reality, from the Ford 428 Cobra Jet, the 1972 model year also had a lower compression ratio to assist with emissions regulations. It also received a more breathable set of air vents. However, these cars still maintained the small bumpers. During the later half of 1972 through 1974, we saw the introduction of the new Panta L, where L stood for Lusso. The Lussos were now fitted with US crash test compliant bumpers, which altered the beautiful lines of the Panta, yet to be honest, the vehicle performed better than others from the period. These new bumpers, although not great, weren't ugly either. Power dropped to just 265 horsepower for the US market vehicles, and the interior received a refreshed dashboard design that actually looked much better, especially while gazing at that amazing gated shifter in the Panta. The Panta Lussos, however, got significant quality of life updates and refinements which greatly improved the overall experience beyond just speed. This was enough to earn the Panta Lusso the title of Import Car of the Year. Meanwhile, in Europe, De Tomaso launched the Panta GTS, which was a higher performance variant of the Panta, without the emissions restrictions based around Group 3 racing. These cars feature a high compression ratio 351 engine and some additional breathing mods that made 345 horsepower. The GTS was also brought to the US in very limited quantities without all the cool go-fast parts, so it was essentially an exterior trim package. All of this continued until 1975, when Ford officially reassessed the Panta's presence stateside after selling a total of 5,500 vehicles through their dealer network. The Panta actually sold quite well for a sports car in its niche, but by this time, the 351 Cleveland was no longer available in the US. With sales slowing and a performance gas crisis underway, Ford decided to exit selling the Panta stateside. However, sales continued abroad, and they would end up making some of the coolest Pantas ever. Amidst changing times, De Tomaso now had to source the 351 Ford Cleveland engines from Ford Australia, as the engine was still being produced there. That's exactly what they did, and they continued producing the Panta and selling it abroad and even in the US through some gray market channels until 1980. It was essentially unchanged, but 1980 was when the 10-year-old sports car got a second lease on life. This was when the De Tomaso Panta GT5 emerged, following the Lamborghini Countach playbook for a facelift by making the vehicle much more aggressive visually. These new GT5 Pantas had a full-body kit that included massive wheel arches, a new lower fascia, and a huge rear wing. Enormous 345 rear tires were now fitted, and power was bumped to over 350 horsepower due to emissions regulations abroad. Then after the GT5, there was the GT5S, which was essentially the same as the GT5 but with a more subdued body. However, it still featured a large wing and wider fenders. These vehicles were built throughout the 1980s, with just over a total of 400 GT5 and GT5S vehicles being produced. Despite the suspension refresh that occurred in 1980, there was no hiding that the Panta was beginning to show its age, and most people thought this would be the end of the line for the car. But to everyone's surprise, 1990 saw one last hurrah for the De Tomaso Panta, the Panta 90 Psi. This car wasn't just another refresh of the GTS that was updated again. No, the new Panta 90 Psi was completely redesigned by the legendary Marcello Gandini, who designed the Miura, the Countach, and the Diablo. The updated Panta 90 Psi was stunning. Gandini somehow managed to capture the essence of the original car and facelift it in a way very reminiscent of the Porsche 911, where the same timeless shape remained but somehow looked contemporary at the same time. This new Panta drew design inspiration from the Ferrari F40 and other sports cars of the time. Underneath, the original Panta frame was replaced with a brand new tubular frame that housed a newly revised suspension system with even better brakes. From a design and engineering standpoint, the Panta 90 Psi was brought into an entirely new era. However, there was one issue. The 351 Cleveland engine itself was no longer in production anywhere in the world. So De Tomaso had to resort to installing what was essentially a Fox-body Mustang 302 with an EFI system into the new Panta. This kept the spirited nature of the car alive, but came at the cost of nearly 100 horsepower less than the previous 351. Despite this, De Tomaso sold the Panta 90 Psi from 1990 to 1993, with a total of 41 vehicles being produced during those years until it was phased out for the new De Tomaso Guerra, which was intended to be the Panta's successor but never quite took off. Unfortunately, by 1993, De Tomaso's 20-plus year production run was over, and all that remained was a community of car enthusiasts around the world who were still captivated by this unique Italian-American hybrid. Today, the Panta is cherished as one of the classics and remains an excellent candidate for a restored project for someone looking to piece together their own Italian-bodied beast for a fraction of the cost compared to doing so with a Ferrari. Based on its history, look, feel, and that glorious American V8, I would choose a Panta over a Ferrari any day. Let me know in the comments below if you feel the same way. Thank you all for watching another episode of our fascinating car documentary series. If you enjoyed this video, we would greatly appreciate it if you could drop a like and share it with other enthusiasts. Please make sure you are subscribed to our Rare Cars Revivals YouTube channel and hit that notification bell for more documentary-style videos like this one on the world's most interesting cars. Until next time.